Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. You are still watching NTV Weekend Edition and this is Talk of the Nation. Now today, Uganda has joined the rest of the world to celebrate the Palliative and Hospice Care Day. The commemoration comes at a time when a number of people who need a long-term care is on the rise due to a number of factors. Now with us in studio to give a better understanding of what palliative care is and why it is becoming increasingly important is Mark Donald Mwesigwa, the country director of the Palliative Care Association of Uganda. Good evening, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening, everyone.
So we do start with, first things first, an overview of what exactly palliative and hospice care is all about.
So thank you so much, NTV, for having me. And palliative care and hospice are always used interchangeably, but actually the approach is palliative care and hospice is part of
palliative care.
Yes. Oh. So palliative care is about relieving pain and suffering among people who have health-related suffering. And when we talk about health-related suffering, we mean any distress or pain or discomfort that is as a result of an injury or a health condition. Now, this is something that cannot be dealt with for you as an individual. It extends and it needs professional support. In other words, it needs you to seek medical attention or a professional medical personnel. Now, palliative care as an approach, you can call it comfort care, you can call it holistic care for a person who has a life-limiting illness, and it is not only for the individual but also for the caregiver and also for the family. Why do I say all this? Because when a person is diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, and we get a challenge every day because life-limiting illness is sometimes people talk about cancer these days as an issue. And so we could use that example. So
is there something different from cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the conditions that require a palliative care approach are really multifaceted. It's a long list. But in the era of non-communicable diseases now, where some diseases are more pronounced, there's a lot of work around the cancer world. And so you find that, for example, in the past, in the few times past, we've been talking about AIDS, and AIDS, which is a result of HIV AIDS, you know. And so, but now with the antiretroviral therapy, we don't get to see many people, or we don't get to see palliative care pronounced in AIDS a lot. But what I was explaining is that this approach of palliative care, which is very important, is given to the patient, to the caregiver and the family, in a sense that it supports the process within the process of treatment, but up to end of life. Now the approach intensifies as the trajectory of disease goes on, or with the prognosis once the disease is identified, or what we can say is diagnosed. At the point you need palliative care, for example, to accept the condition, accept the treatment, because palliative care will come in with psychosocial support, with counseling, with comfort,
I was about to ask
education.
you, how is it administered?
Yes.
Because you talked about it relieving pain.
Yes.
How is it administered? Is it through counseling? Is it through feeding someone? Is it through tapping, sponging? How is palliative care given?
Exactly, a very good question. So this approach goes along with other interventions, for example, treatment. As the patient or somebody who has a condition that is being handled is being treated, then the palliative care approach, which has a holistic sense of looking at an individual with their physical need, which could be pain on the body, the pain is treated with medicine. The psychosocial pain, which is the psychology of somebody perhaps worried about this condition, can't be treated with physical medicine, so that's counseling. The social pain, somebody is married, has been diagnosed with a condition that they think will deter them from being in that marriage or being fulfilling their roles. For example, some people have to leave jobs, or they have to stay away, to take leave for some time, so the socio-economic bit is touched. You have to assure or to deal with them and have them, or sometimes even the palliative care provider has the duty to explain to the employer that this condition requires a particular amount of time for people to seek treatment. But we also talk about the legal support. For example, there is sometimes when somebody is diagnosed with a condition that they may need to prepare, for example, at end of life, succession planning, making a will, and we go up to bereavement when somebody has really passed on and making sure that the family, the real idea of palliative care is that there is dignity in the process of somebody who is unwell and with their family.
Well, Mr. Mwesigwa, beg your pardon, the reports indicating that Ugandans are now, embracing or are now the demand for palliative care is on the rise. Why is this so? Why is this coming at a time such as this?
So that's a good question again. Why are we pronouncing palliative care now unlike before? And why is everybody talking about it? Today we are commemorating the World Hospice and Palliative Care Day. And that's one of the biggest issues that we are answering. Why is it now? Why do we hear a lot of palliative care? Globally, the population, as we continue to see more people aging and less people dying before they age. Even in Uganda, we see, for example, 1.5 million people above the age of 60. We all know that as we age, we are susceptible to life conditions, for example, diseases. But we also know that the lifestyle of our age now has changed a lot. And so we get lifestyle diseases. We can talk about NCDs or non-communicable diseases. But we also know that we have improved as the world. The diagnosis of conditions, of diseases, of illnesses has improved. And the more people are diagnosed and found with diseases that require approaches, the more the approaches will come on board. And so it's not that there is anything special, but those three things account for why it's a real big need and that we all need to think about and advocate for, that it is available for us. Well,
getting from your explanation, it clearly indicates that the palliative care is indeed needed. But how accessible is it? And are there special facilities where this palliative care is gotten from?
So right now in our country of Uganda, the Minister of Health has actually directed, the Director General last year issued a directive that all hospitals from the National Referral Hub to Health Center 4 should set up palliative care units and allocate space. That's the ideal for our country. But palliative care should be available from the national regional referral up to the community, really. There is no special thing of saying it should be here, it shouldn't be here. Why? Because even at the community level, when somebody is ill, they should be referred. In our country right now, palliative care is being offered in at least 300 health facilities. Now, talk about 300 versus the over 6,000 health facilities that we have in our country. We break it down at the National Palliative Care Association and say it is available in 107 districts and cities, and therefore we have about 40 districts without any single health facility offering palliative care. Our appeal has been to the government and to all actors, and that's the message we put out today. We all have a role to play. Now that there is development, that we see education for health workers in palliative care improving, we need to see them deployed within the health service to do that particular job, other than doing everything else. We need to see the approach take its ideal form. The majority of patients that are seen in our country in hospitals would rather desire to be taken care of at home. Our public health system is that you need to come to hospital for you to be attended to. And so the public hospital gets you until they discharge you, not to go home to cure, but sometimes to go home to die without a medical caregiver coming to you. So we are advocating and saying, let our approach correspond to the need. That when somebody is discharged from a regional referral hospital where they have been inpatient on the bed, now they are going home because perhaps they're on their end of life period. There should be an approach that follows them at home, reassures them, reassures the family, and manages the pain, which is always a big deal at that end of life, which is not only physical, but also, as I explained before, psychological, psychosocial, and also spiritual. The spiritual leaders have a big role to play within the palliative care.
When it comes
circle.
to palliative care?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how long is someone or a patient subjected to palliative care? And also, as we conclude this conversation, what are some of the challenges that the palliative caregivers face?
So how long somebody is subjected to palliative care will depend on the condition that somebody is facing, and will depend on the approach and how on when they are enrolled into care. The greatest appeal that we make to everybody, and as a palliative care provider, as what we have been saying, is that once healthcare workers find out that this person requires palliative care, in other words, they have been diagnosed with a condition that is lifelong or that is life-threatening, that person should be referred to palliative care. The more the person is in touch with the palliative care provider, the more we get to know about them, the more support we give them, the more quality of life we give them. And now, coming back to the other part of your question, how...
The challenges. What
are the challenges for palliative care in this country? The challenge is, sometimes, you know, when you talk about challenges, there are always many, but Uganda has scored. We are looked at as a model of palliative care in Africa. We still have limited access. We still have our health workers who are specialists not recognized by the public health system. That's on progress. We still have areas not covered fully. The coverage is still small. And we still have many people who don't appreciate the concept and understand it. I think that's the biggest challenge sometimes that we face as palliative care providers.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about palliative care. And that is Mr. Mwesigwa, Mark Donald, of course, getting to shine light on what palliative care is and why it is actually important in the country. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Talk of the Nation. We do take a break and return with NTV Weekend Edition.